Hello, this is Court Watch with Alex Sawyer, and I'm excited to bring you the latest episode of my podcast where I am joined by Alex Marlow, editor-in-chief of Breitbart News and author of Breaking the Law. He'll discuss his new book, out this month, about the weaponization of the justice system. I worked under Marlow at Breitbart between 2015 and 2016, covering the first Trump presidential campaign. Ironically, we both have books about lawfare out this summer, mine Lawless Lawfare and his Breaking the Law. We'll hear from Alex about what he thinks is the biggest takeaway from the Democrats' lawfare against Trump during the 2024 presidential election and what can be done to stop it from happening again. Hey, Alex, thank you so much for joining me in my podcast. I really wanted to ask you specifically why you felt a book was necessary on the topic of lawfare. I mean, I know everyone watched what happened during the 2024 election, but what motivated you to move forward with this project?
Thanks, Alex, for the question. And I can ask you the same thing. I got Lawless Lawfare on my nightstand right now, so congrats on completing that massive project.
You're the professional author. I had no idea what type of work goes into a book. This is your third, I think, right?
It's my third. Yeah, it's the hardest thing I do. And I'm very blessed in my life. I get to do a lot of cool stuff, podcasting, editing Breitbart. But the books are really they're a mountain to climb. So mad respect to you for getting one done. I was going through some of the cases against President Trump in the immediate aftermath of him getting convicted, that felony conviction that was clearly politicized, just from the way I view the world as editor of Breitbart. Obviously, I could tell that this was a political persecution, and the outrage level was building inside me. And I was thinking, this is really, really crazy, but I don't know if people understand fully how crazy it is. And I started to dig. And I found that there were 6 major cases against President Trump, and each one of them was politicized. Each one of them had connections to Joe Biden's White House. And each one of them, I think, was far worse. The cases from a legal perspective, which you could speak to even better than I could, but I would be shocked if you didn't agree, were all so flimsy. And they were designed just to politically persecute the standard bearer of the Republican Party. And I thought, that's not the America that I know. And I don't feel like we're being sufficiently dramatic about how bad this is.
Yeah, right. You're supposed to be able to beat your opponent at the ballot box, not in the courtroom and lock them up, right? That's basically the opposite of what we do here in America. You mentioned some of the cases that you went through. I think I was reading your book, Manhattan Trial, E. Jean Carroll, the civil fraud dispute up in New York, which was just the, large judgment was just tossed. The Fani Willis drama down in Georgia, and then, of course, the 2 federal prosecutions.
Yes.
In your book, there's a quote that I thought was interesting. You said, quote, "I believe the series of cases fundamentally broke the law in this country." What do you mean by that? Can the lawfare cork be kind of put back in the bottle?
Yeah, I think it can over time, but I do think that the system of law and order in this country has been broken. So, and I think that the breaking the law, it's a turn of phrase. That's the title. There's double entendre in it. But what I mean by it overall is that we are supposed to be a society of law and order. Any functioning democracy, or whatever you would like to call our constitutional federal republic system that we have, it relies on law and order, but I've been watching it slowly erode, particularly from my vantage point in California, where we have sanctuary laws and we allow for the border to be open, and we give you rewards if you break the law. And we have
illegals to get driver's license, commercial trucker licenses, right?
Exactly. Commercial trucker license. Yes, as we've been learning in the news. And there's a benefit to breaking the law. You have the Gascon specials, where if you steal a certain amount in LA, then you get out right away, and with cashless bail. And so we've actually incentivized criminality in the country. And you trace this back, as I do in the first couple chapters of the book, and it really has been a long time coming, where we've been trying to create 2, I actually argue 3 tiers of justice in this country. And that means law and order is broken. So the law itself is broken. I think it became official with the level they took these cases against President Trump. They're all unprecedented, all 6 of them. One of the key points in the book is that they all rely on novel interpretations of the law. All 6 of the cases rely on something that had never been tried before in order to convict Trump. And when you're doing 6 new efforts at a time, nothing with precedent at a time, to take out a guy who's trying to run for president, that's completely new in this country, and we've been way too casual about it.
Yes, I totally agree. In fact, when I was thinking about with my book, like what title to choose, I almost went with overkill because I think the
Yeah.
American public just saw it was complete overkill. It was flimsy cases, but then the sheer number of them was unbelievable. One thing I was going to ask you, you kind of mentioned something, but I'm going to circle back to it first. The E. Jean Carroll lawsuits
Yeah.
were, to me, very interesting. I took defamation courses in law school. I always was kind of interested in that area of law. And you said, I have another quote from your book. You said, she's not so much the instigator of the case as she is a pawn of the lawfare superstructure. And then you said the E. Jean Carroll case may be the purest example of lawfare. What did you find the most troubling about this one?
Yeah, thank you. This is always fun to talk about. It was the lowest stakes of the 6 cases that I go through, but it was the one that was the most offensive when you read it. And Alex, if you have my sense of humor, if you read the first few pages of that chapter, then you start laughing with it. It's so absurd.
I know
the
you
details.
mentioned, I think it was like what she named her cat and her dog, like vagina and tits, something.
Yeah, exactly
Pretty
right.
wild.
So we knew she had a cat named Vagina, which Trump wanted to introduce in the courtroom, and he wasn't allowed, which is a theme. And then I learned through my research that she also had a dog named Tits. So that's the type of person we're talking about. So this is a person who she's got no eyewitnesses. She didn't yell. She claims that Donald Trump, who at the time was still one of the most famous New Yorkers, period, across the street from Trump Tower, decided he would corner her in a Bergdorf Goodman department store dressing room. He would rape her, or maybe not, because he couldn't decide. She couldn't decide in language. She'd go back and forth whether or not it was a definition of rape.
Well, to be fair, the jury said he didn't rape her, right? But I think the judge kind of stepped in and.
That's correct,
No.
which is completely bizarre. Like, so
Right.
the jury said he didn't, and the judge cut in and said actually he did, which I'd never seen anything like that before. Maybe you did, yeah. So, and then some of the details of the case, her recounting of the story, which again, no eyewitnesses. It was almost the exact plot of a Law and Order episode. Literally, yes. She was a Law and Order fan, though she claimed it was anher Law and Order series, not the one where this episode was on. But come on, she had a dress.
Yeah, that's true. Ahead. And how many people actually, were able to, I guess, voters and the audiences were able to have that sort of information shared with them through news reports? Of course, very little. That wasn't something that was shed much light onto.
Fantastic point. It's just like how in this interview with Anderson Cooper, she said that rape is sexy, that Trump wanted to introduce that in court. It was not allowed by the judge, Lewis Kaplan. She apparently had a dress that she wore that day that she preserved and didn't wash it. Just note, she's very dramatic. She's a dramatist. She used to write for Saturday Night Live. So she keeps this Monica Lewinsky dress, has never washed it, not admissible in court for who knows what reason. And this bizarre Anderson Cooper interview, Alex, I recommend everyone in your audience to check this out because it's crazy. Like, she's vacillating with her story. Trump's team wants this out there. They can't put it out there. But in the meantime, the judge allows for the Access Hollywood tape to be played for who knows what reason why that was allowed, other than to show that Trump is some sort of a bad guy.
Yeah, to prejudice I would say the defendant.
That's correct. Exactly right. So perfect way. And you've got the vocabulary even better than I do probably, but that's right. That's what they're trying to do. And so just start to finish, one detail after the next time you read the detail, this is not family friendly, but she also claimed he raped her with half his penis. Like, is that a thing? I don't know. And I don't know. I don't think it is. And so and she's saying this and she's got no eyewitnesses. She didn't tell anyone at the time, maybe 2 friends, neither of whom, testify. And it's just like, what are we supposed to do? She sat on her hands the whole Me Too, didn't say a word, even though she's a public person who writes an advice column. And then all of a sudden, George Conway comes in and says, this is a good idea. We should go after Trump with it. Conway meets her at a party or something, and he starts quarterbacking it. He gets Reid Hoffman on board, a billionaire donor who is one of Biden's biggest champions. He went to the White House 5 times in 2022 alone. And now he's buying the best Me Too attorneys, period, to get Trump. And then finally, just to top it all off, she asked for $15 million there's 2 cases. She asked for $15 million combined, and the penalty assessed to Trump ends up being $90 million. So 6 times what she even asked for. Wild. If that's not cruel and unusual punishment, Alex, what is?
Yeah, exactly. And I think a big reason why we might see this reduced on appeal, we have to wait and see. I know now, hopefully he takes it up the chain. You mentioned something just there that kind of leads into my next question. You talked about, being able to pay these Me Too lawyers, right? And the funding aspect. Something I didn't cover in my book that I think you really went into detail in your book that I thought was great and shows the political nature of what happens kind of like inside and behind the lawfare. Is the money that goes into these types of attorneys. And you even go as far as to talk about like the funding of these district attorneys out in deep blue areas and like their campaigns. Can you talk a little bit about the research you found and the structure behind like, what we're seeing? And I guess this even goes beyond the lawfare against Trump and looks at like places like LA where you're familiar with.
And thank you for this. And let me say, I hope this is an area where people dig deeper, because this is something that is featured prominently in Breaking the Law, but it's something when I've been doing these interviews since the book came out, this is really one of the favorite things for interviewers. Interviewers are very interested in this. And I try to I map the superstructure is the way I frame it up in terms of what are the elements of lawfare beyond just, we know Joe Biden's a bad guy. We know Letitia James is a bad lady, but it goes beyond that and who's funding it. And some of the funding sources are new, and some of the ones that are familiar to you are much worse than you would think. For example, the Reid Hoffman example, where we know he's a guy who funds left-wing stuff, but we didn't know, at least I didn't know, that he basically single-handedly is responsible for the E. Jean Carroll case. More than Carroll herself, in my view, is that this guy was able to fund everything that she needed. That's really important. George Soros, we all know Soros is a bad guy. He's single-handedly ruining all of our cities by buying these DA races and then letting the cities fester. And they're becoming just chaotic areas that don't represent our country very well and are destroying what it means to have a country, because the whole rule of law is undermined by people he's essentially installed with his money. These are big deals. But then you meet some new names. And we have a big profile of Breitbart that I just put out recently that people can check out. This guy, Herb Sandler. Herb Sandler was a banking magnate, and he made a lot of money on these really risky loans, these ARM loans, but it's called pick a pay, where basically all these people got these loans from this bank he ran that were really risky. Predatory is how they've been described, but these people will sue you. So I want to be very careful. It's how critics have described it, as predatory. And he gets out in 2006. So right before the financial crisis, and these exact types of loans lead to the financial crisis, but he had already cashed out billions of dollars. What he does with the billions is he starts funding the left-wing lawfare apparatus, in particular ProPublica, which does hit pieces full-time on Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito, trying to make their lives miserable. But he also funds other things that amplify left-wing activism, like Arabella Advisors, things like that. Now, he's passed away, which is interesting, but he's got the Sandler Foundation in his name that's doing all this work. And this is a big reason why lawfare is as prominent as it is this guy's got billions of dollars to throw around to people who participate. Last one I'll mention to you, David Brock, Project 65. David Brock founded Media Matters, familiar to everyone in your audience. Well, the guy founded Media Matters. What he's doing now is trying to get conservative lawyers disbarred. That's what he's doing on a daily basis.
Right, and we've seen a lot of that.
It's very scary.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing to touch on is like the attacks that we've seen on Ken Paxton, John Eastman, Sidney Powell. Anyone that represents any sort of conservative figure ends up having to be called before a bar association to see if they're going to have their law license revoked. Ed Martin just recently in D.C., Giuliani. That to me is one of the most, as a lawyer, that's one of the most troubling things you've seen, because there's ethics complaints against people like Adam Schiff. And so far, we haven't seen him have to go answer to any of those. This
is what I talk about when I say the law is broken, is that we used to have I didn't go to law school, you did, Alex, so I'm sure you can speak to this, but I used to be under the impression in this country that you were entitled to great representation if guilty or innocent. That's why we have Miranda rights. Like, you're entitled to an attorney. Like, if you can't afford one, we'll give you an attorney. And then now it's if you represent the wrong person, it's not just you can't get a white shoe law firm job. You can't be a commentator on MSNBC. No, this is you flat out cannot work. You cannot be a lawyer. And that is crazy to me. The people who ply their craft for decades, you take one J6 case and now you can't work ever again. That to me is broken. That's a broken system.
Agree. A lot of these state bar associations, some are run by the state, some are separate. I find it very interesting because what you just kind of hit on is not only like a Sixth Amendment right for a defendant and the concern there, but also the First Amendment right for those who are able to speak freely, associate, assemble freely, and that's kind of being interrupted. I wanted to ask you, my last question I always ask is, what did I not ask you that you found in your research for this book that you think is important to share with the audience? And lastly, where can they go to buy your book?
Thank you. You buy it anywhere. I'm fine with Amazon. I know some people don't like it, but if you don't like Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes and Noble, do not try to find it at your local independent bookstore. They will not put it on the shelves. But the Barnes and Noble should have a copy, but Amazon's easiest, so that's fine with me. Thank you. I will say the thing that is interesting is that I'm actually feeling optimistic. I lay out a Leviathan that I think is the single biggest threat to MAGA right now, which is the lawfare superstructure, which includes the law schools, it includes the bar associations, it includes these district judges, and of course it includes the DOJ, which has its own deep state element. But overall, I feel optimistic that if we continue the playbook that Trump's been running, where he's not breaking the law himself, he's using legal means, persuasion, conservative activism, I do think that we can replace a lot of the liberals who are causing problems in our lawfare system that we have over time. And I think if we're patient and we're steadfast and we're diligent, I actually have a lot of hope that this is a winnable battle. It's going to be a long battle, probably take decades, but it feels winnable to me compared to some other things I've written about. Have felt very bleak. This feels a little less bleak. It feels like we can do this one.
Well, I'm happy that you're ending an optimistic note because I feel I was a little worried that we're going to see lawfare kind of be waged back and forth from one administration to another, but I hope you're right. So thank you so much for your time, and I'll make sure that I spread this across all of my social media platforms with a link to your book because I read it. It's great.
Thanks, Alex. I really appreciate it, and I'll pick up Lawless Lawfare too, and you can compare and contrast.
Yeah, I think that it would be fun to tag team on our next one because there's more lawfare to come, I fear.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not going to stop. It absolutely won't. So thank you. It's great to be back in touch, and it's very kind of you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for tuning in to the latest episode of Court Watch. If you have not subscribed yet to this podcast, please do so, and also feel free to email me interesting questions or topics that you want explored about the legal reporting world. I'll do my best to answer them during each episode. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Listen to my podcast, Court Watch, at WashingtonTimes.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.